Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Police are investigating a number of Tory-held constituencies over allegations they may have broken their local spending rules in last year's general election. An investigation by Channel 4 News has questioned whether the Conservative Party declared expenses centrally instead of locally, which would have taken them over agreed spending limits. So what difference would it make if it were found to have been illegal? In other words, is it just bureaucratic nitpicking or a complete game changer? David Grossman reports.
In the 18th century, elections were filthy, corrupt affairs. This is the 1754 contest from the paintbrush of William Hogarth. There's bribing voters, mob violence and widespread fraud. Modern election rules were supposed to stop all this.
Electors are getting increasingly concerned that we're moving back to the days of the rotten boroughs where a party can buy an election.
I don't think, as an election lawyer, I could put my hand on my heart and say for the last 15 to 20 years we've had a copper-bottom guarantee that we've got free and fair elections in this country. I think we're losing that guarantee.
OK, so I don't think they had battle buses in Hogarth's day, but the Conservatives are accused of driving a coach, if not horses, through election law. The story was broken and developed over the past 3 months by Channel 4 News. To make sense of this story, you have to realise there are two different types of election spending limit. The first is local constituency spending limits. Here, roughly, a candidate can spend a maximum of £14,500 trying to convince voters. It varies depending on the number of electors and the type of seat. However, there's also a national limit on what parties can spend on their national campaign. Assuming they're contesting every seat in the election, which none of them do, they could spend a maximum of £19.5 million in the 12 months leading up to polling day. However, these are separate types of spending. One is local, on local constituency campaigning, and the other is national, on national campaigning.
Do you know the name of the MP for Basel?
Local spending limits were never much of a problem because the parties had armies of volunteers to tramp the streets and stuff envelopes, all unpaid. But since 2005, half of Tory activists have left the party.
The Tories were targeting 100 key seats at the election. In many of those seats, they just didn't have the party members on the ground to go out and campaign. So what they decided to do was build up a big activist base of volunteers who were signed up through the party centrally, and then to move them in buses to the areas where they were needed most.
At the last general election, the Conservatives had 5 buses ferrying volunteers into target seats. They were known as Team 2015. Here's one arriving in the target seat of Thanet South. Then party chairman Grant Shapps was desperate to defeat Nigel Farage, who was standing there for UKIP.
So let's get out there, let's go campaign for Craig.
It's clear they've come to help the Conservative candidate, Craig McKinley, win the seat.
Thank you, Team 2015, for coming down. You'll be working today with a good number of our locals.
But unlike those locals, all the bussed-in campaigners needed transport, feeding and a place to stay.
In order to get people to turn out and campaign, you have to make it a bit of a party. If you give them food, a free curry, say, at the end of the day, and a beer, and encourage them to have a bit of fun together, then you'll get more people turning up.
Channel 4 uncovered thousands of pounds worth of receipts on hotels and food for campaigners in target seats like Thanet South, none of which was recorded against local candidate spending. Gavin Miller QC is a specialist in election law and a former Labour councillor.
That falls within local expenditure. What the law looks at is the end product of that work that's being done, and then it looks back to see how you funded it. So if the work that's being done by those campaigners is with the aim of promoting or procuring the particular election of a particular candidate in the constituency, the Labour candidate, the Liberal candidate, the Tory candidate, whatever it may be, if money is spent getting them there and locating them there to enable them to do that work, transport costs, hotel costs, subsistence, That is an election expense for that candidate at that election.
We asked Craig McKinley, now Conservative MP for Thanet South, for an interview. He referred us to the Conservative Party press office, who gave us the following statement. The party always took the view that our national battle bus, a highly publicised campaign activity, was part of the national return. Other political parties ran similar vehicles which visited different parliamentary constituencies as part of their national campaigning.
If it is a mistake, it's because the rules have not been implicit enough about where that costing should go.
And is it a mistake if it is that, unique to the Conservative Party?
No, I think what we're seeing is that there's a conspiracy of silence from the other parties because they're all culpable. If there's a mistake being made, all the parties have made it, and it doesn't seem fair that only Conservative MPs have been singled out for investigation.
Labour too took activists to key seats using a bus they called the Labour Express. The main difference with the Conservative operation seems to be that it was far smaller, and since Labour didn't win many target seats, the Labour candidates aren't MPs who are liable to legal challenge.
I think that since we've introduced national spending limits, it's given an excuse, if you like, a cover to the national parties where they have the money and can identify a particular constituency that is one of their marginals and one they want to win, where they need a little extra help, to spend money in that constituency and apportion it to the national political spend, the national electoral spend.
Labour too declined our request for an interview, but gave us the following statement. Labour is clear. The Labour Express and the Deputy Leader's tour during the general election campaign were part of a nationally branded tour. As such, the transport costs are rightly national spend. The Lib Dems, though, completely reject the idea that they bussed in activists.
It's frustrating that the Conservatives are now trying to say that the leader's bus, which each of the parties has and has always been deemed to be a national expense, equates to the 5 battle buses that the Conservatives ran, crammed full of activists, often because their own local activists were too old and not coming out, bussed in to seat after seat, week after week during the campaign, where they were going in to canvass, deliver leaflets, do all the things you'd expect for a particular local candidate.
Fiona Jones arrived at Nottingham Magistrates Court to face a criminal charge.
The penalties for knowingly misreporting your election spending are severe. In 1999, Labour MP Fiona Jones was convicted and immediately barred from public office, although the verdict was overturned on appeal. A dozen police forces are now investigating. Around 30 MPs are implicated. Whatever happens next, it's a shame we don't have Hogarth around to give us his take.
David Grossman.